afternoon. My name is Denise Wint Scamp, board member and chair of the Strategic and External Affairs Committee. Thank you for joining us in our third session of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Affordable Housing Construction. Since November 2020, SCAMP, in partnership with LISC Los Angeles, convened 2 workshops to discuss the role that affordable housing developers play in centering race, equity, and inclusion in the affordable housing development and construction processes. During the first session, we learned about the economic impact of affordable housing construction and opportunities to close the wealth gap. In addition, we participated in a dialogue with developers and owners' representatives on the roles we play in increasing DEI in our hiring practices for construction. The last session, we focused on developers in different phases of implementing DEI goals in construction contracts, where developer members shared their lessons learned in the adoption of DEI policies for general contractor hiring and steps to provide more opportunities for minority-owned subcontractors and suppliers. This session will focus on the general contractor's perspective, including the person who is the reason why this whole web series began. We will explore how the industry and individual organizations can help to advance tools, thresholds, and policies to collaboratively pursue inclusive hiring goals in partnership with general contractors. You will hear from developers in different stages of this process, including a case study detailing a pilot that established contractual DEI policies and thresholds memorialized in a project's contractor agreement. We will also examine barriers for contractors and how we can collectively help to diversify the base of subcontractors hired to support projects in the industry. Again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And if you would like to see our previous sessions and this session, then please be sure to go to our SCAMP YouTube page. Also, if you've registered for the event, you would also receive the recording of today's session. We look forward to your engagement throughout this session as well. So remember to post your comments in the chat and your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll address those at the question and answer session towards the end of the webinar series. So with that said, I will hand this off to our moderator. Today, Tanua was not able to join us this afternoon, so filling in for her is Van Scott, Director of Development for Bridge Housing. Thank you, Van.
All right, thank you, Denise. I just was having some technical issues, but I'm hoping that everything's good now. So thank you all. Thank our panelists, who you all will meet in just a moment. But we've got a great opportunity for folks today to really look at kind of that next step in terms of, as many of you, as Denise had shared, kind of in our last series, had some concerns on how do we actually diversify our workforce in terms of folks working on the site, as well as our subcontractors. And I think with our panel today, you're gonna hear from some folks who are actually doing the work and have been involved in the work in ways in which you'll be able to take some lessons back and hopefully make some new contacts. So we're going to start off today with a project that's in the early stages and getting ready to be kicked off, and that's going to be shared with us today by Rosalind Ross of Community Housing Works. She's a project manager there and manages all phases of the development process. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Community Housing Works has been around since 1988 and is recognized nationally for the work that they've done. They are involved in affordable housing development in their work in San Diego primarily, but also throughout the state of California. And they have a partnership with Peter Bridge of Sun Country Builders, who has been around since the early 1980s as well, and have been very involved in helping and working with developers in terms of project planning, problem solving, and coordinating with developers on goals like we're discussing today in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And with that, and Sun Country has also been involved in completing more than 100 affordable housing projects. So they're very familiar with our affordable housing world and very experienced in that regard. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rosalind and to Peter for their our first presentation.
All right. Thank you, Van, for that great introduction, and welcome, and thank you, Denise and the rest of the SCAMP board for having this discussion. And I'm honored to share with what we're doing at Community Housing Works regarding DEI and affordable housing construction. So I'm happy to be able to share with this amazing group and all amazing developers about what we're doing. Next slide. So just a little introduction about Community Housing Works. Van kind of did a great summary, but we are a 33-year-old nationally recognized nonprofit. Again, we are headquartered in San Diego, but we work throughout the state of California, with our kind of most northern property currently is in Sacramento. 65% of our property portfolio is in San Diego County. We are owner developer, so like probably a lot of people here at the webinar, we hold our properties for a long period of time. Also, we were just recently recognized with the Affordable Housing Finance magazine as one of the top 50 developers throughout the country. Next slide. So what are we doing in DEI and construction? I think just probably like a lot of organizations with the national focus, especially last year, of what has happened in our country, that accelerated our work in DEI. And we really wanted to expand our goal and expand it in a way that is a scalable model. So the first thing we did was we got a working group. It was really important for CHW leadership to be involved. So, and our housing and real estate development department as well. So the working group, it consisted of our CEO of Community Housing Works, as well as our COO, our Senior Vice President of Housing and Real Estate Development, our Vice President of Development. We had our Director of Advancement, who handles all of our marketing and our grant writing. And also we had some of our project managers, myself being one of them, all together, along with our general construction partners. We have one here, Sun Country Builders. We had our main construction managers. And then we also had the National Black Contractors Association, which is actually a national organization headquartered in San Diego, who has a network of other Black contractors throughout the state, as well as actually in other places, Chicago, Atlanta, I think Dallas as well. So we had our working group together, and we wanted to, how do we do this? And it was really a brain dump and just a discussion of what are all the impediments, what are the impediments, the obstructions, and the opportunities that come with increasing and going deep into our construction and bringing more opportunities for people in the construction industry. So we met virtually, probably over the past 8 months, about 2 or 3 times, to really kind of understand, figure out what our goal, meaning Community Housing Works goals, and how can we be a part of the solution. So one of the things we also did, we learned from our industry peers. We attended the previous SCAMP webinars where we heard what other organizations have done, some of the questions that are asked. We brought that back to the group. How can, again, to see how can we actually develop a plan, an actionable plan, because we didn't want to have something where we just do a lot of talking and nothing really comes with it. We want something that's actionable, that's doable, that we can build upon. The other point that we talked about was obstructions. What are the things that hinder new small mom and pop contractors, or what are the other or impediments to getting into the construction industry that are particular for our BIPOC and our disadvantaged businesses? So we thought through about certification and about outreach, working capital, those things that are some barriers, I call it barriers to entry, for a lot of people to really be successful and grow in this industry. And then lastly, we also kind of at CHW, we looked at kind of our past performance. One of the things we are very successful is doing Section 3 reporting. However, what we understood is Section 3 reporting is limited. It neutralizes race and gender. And if we wanted to expand, we needed to kind of grow and expand, go beyond Section 3. Section 3 is a good kind of baseline, but we definitely needed to look at it further. And so from those brainstorms and those discussions and really hearing from all of our partners, we came up with kind of our overall mission, kind of our goals, and then said, hey, let's get started. Let's really start putting this into action in our upcoming projects. Next slide. So what we came up with at Community Housing Works is we kind of came up with kind of 3 blocks that we really wanted to focus our diversity, equity, and inclusion activities on. The first block, as you see, the blue one is apprenticeships, or what I like to call workforce training. And that's really thinking about the career, the pathways for our residents and our neighbors in our communities where we're working and serving, how they're able to have construction as a career path. We also wanted to make sure we partner and find existing workforce programs, as well as making sure that we have a very broad engagement and outreach to all of our communities for construction job opportunities. The second kind of bucket in the middle will be in orange, it will be partnerships. And with that, that is also, again, what are our DEI goals? You have to have a goal that you are striving towards in anything that you do. So, what are those organizational goals that we have? Also, how can we facilitate opportunities for our BIPOC and our disadvantaged businesses to secure the vendors and relationships with Community Housing Works? And also, we wanted to expand. We also have to look at, we have to expand our DEI contracting resources and our partnerships. So that's another thing, participating in webinars today, understanding and, getting to know who is out there. So again, that only does a better service, a greater service for us to expand our BIPOC partnership. And then the last kind of bucket here is construction contracts. So having actual DEI goals centered around subcontracting and workforce job goals, engaging and outreaching in disadvantaged minority business enterprises, women business enterprises, as well as veteran business enterprises. And then also, what are those impediments, to securing those contracts, making sure we have resources lined up for any of our businesses to support them, and also support our general contractors in reaching our goals. Next slide. So, good talk. Yes, we got these pretty charts, but it's always time for action. You have to implement what you're set out to do. So as we're starting some of our pilot, we call it our pilot DEI terms, but also this is in some of our upcoming pipeline construction projects. The first thing is putting in a contract as part of our GCAI contract, having those list of terms, having also discussing before we even get to the AI, to the contracting stage, talking about these goals, what it means, how to do it, and those things like that. So again, we're partners. We don't look at GC as, okay, we hired you, you got to work. We work in tangent with our general contractors. A lot of them are on our projects as early as some of the pre-development stage. So they have been there through the design, through entitlement. So, this is just as important as any other of our stages as well. The other point, we looked at 3 focuses. We really wanted to make sure outreach, subcontracting, and again, in workforce are those 3 kind of main things we wanted to really focus as we're starting this program. And then we needed to measure. We needed to actually set a bar of what we're trying to do in these next couple of projects. So in outreach, one of the things we want to ensure that our general contractors do, they reach out to our BIPOC partners, our CHW properties for workforce or even for subcontracting opportunities, any local regional agencies and other partnerships of that way, so that again, it makes sure our outreach is expanded. The second measure is subcontracting. We're looking at currently, as our base, 20% of total subcontractors are what we call minority business enterprises. And so we're using the federal definition, but that doesn't mean that they have to have the certification. One of the things we're looking at is, and talking with our general contractor is saying, if there's a subcontractor who has the qualifications of an MBE but doesn't have the certification, let's look at what they have to, show that. So that again, it's still, we want to take the certification as a barrier, but we want to make sure we work with good businesses that are out there who may or may not have the certification. Another goal is having 10% of our total businesses as Section 3 businesses. Again, we always look at the kind of federal definition of that as well, and seeing how, if it's feasible or not. And again, we work with our general contractors on these. Under workforce, we actually have about 3 goals that we're looking at. The first one is 30% of the workforce is a Section 3 worker. Section 3 usually looks at income of depending on the area that you're working in. The second one is 20% of our workforce identifies as BIPOC, and we use the definition of BIPOC as Black, Indigenous, people of color. So we want to make sure in our jobs, in our affordable housing developments, that there's a certain number of BIPOC workforce that is present throughout the project. And then the last one is 10% of the workforce is currently or just completed some type of training. And so we're again kind of massaging that and looking at, knowing that last year is kind of like a iffy year about if anyone had any type of training, just because of a lot of the COVID mandates, but we want to at least have a workforce that is in training, have some of the skills, working with some of the local partners in that type of training. And then with all of this good data, all these good percentages, we wanted to report it. We want to make sure that our general contractors are sharing, where they are at different stages of the project. We want the data, because I think with that information, we can go like, okay, to the next step. When you finish a project, we don't want to know at the end of the project, where we are in these percentages, if we've met them or if we exceed them. We want to know while we're under construction. So the next thing is, taking this information, taking what we learned from the project, and then how can we move forward? What are our lessons learned? Because just in anything, you're not going to knock it out of the park. I say, the first time you might hit, I'm trying to use some good baseball analogy, so bear with me. You might hit, a first base, you might hit, foul ball. But we want to take those lessons learned and be able to, figure out what went well, what didn't go well. How can we do this moving forward? How can we do better? And then also, this is just, I always call step 1. This is our, going into this is where we're going to start, but we definitely don't want this to be where we continue and end. We do want to think about how can we expand our DEI goals as we move forward in other projects, throughout our work here. So with that being said, I'm going to move this over and to Peter Bridge, who is our partner in this from Sun Country Builder.
Rosalind, thanks. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised that as a general contractor, I tend to think in a linear fashion. I tend to think practically. I tend to try to identify the problems and then find the shortest line to the solution. So I'm going to break what I'm going to touch on into 2 general categories. And if I could have my challenges slide. I will share with you, I have myself spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on the phone doing personal outreach to MBE, DBE, Section 3 local hire subs. And I can tell you that outreach takes an enormous amount of time. It needs to be done personally. What I assure you is that an email blast is unacceptable. It's not only not sufficient, it's unacceptable. Outreach needs to be done one sub at a time, person to person. And I would go even further to say that it takes more than one, it takes more than two contacts to bring a sub into your sub base who's never worked with us, who's never worked in our industry, who's maybe challenged by our project, and I'll touch on that idea. So I think I've said enough about it takes time, it's hard work. Small subs have to be pursued and they have to be encouraged. I kind of touched on that. Small subs are often too small to do the job. That's an answer I get on the phone a lot. Oh, your job is too big for us. And what I've been starting to think about, how can I carve up trades? Can I give a little HVAC guy the community building? Now, that's not convenient for a general contractor to do that. That means two contracts. It means managing two subs. It means added risk. But this entire process that we're talking about is inconvenient. And we're going to accept the inconvenience that it takes to get us to our goals. But it requires that we think creatively about this and manage our projects a little bit differently. Small subs often aren't familiar with prevailing wage processes. We do all our prevailing wage processing in-house. Perhaps that's typical of most GCs in our industry. I'm not really sure. But we've got a great prevailing wage office at Sun Country Builders, and we have on a number of occasions trained subs to manage prevailing wage processes. I got to tell you, it breaks my heart that an MBE, DBE sub isn't familiar with prevailing wage, because that's where the opportunity is. Prevailing wage jobs with government funding that have MBE, DBE requirements, that's where the opportunity is for these folks. And so we try to take them by the hand and train them. Prevailing wages, however, brings up my next subject. Small subs are typically unable to carry their receivables for the payable periods that we experience on our projects. It's pretty rare that we get paid on 30 days. So let's just say that we get paid on 45 days, often 60. A little guy, a little shop doesn't have the cash flow to pay his employees. He's probably paying his guys weekly, and he simply does not have the cash on hand to carry our project for us. So I don't know about the other GCs out there, but we occasionally dip into our pockets to carry subs, but we have to be very defensive about our cash balance because that's what supports our bonding capacity. So we very reluctantly dip into our cash balance. Now, I want to toss out an idea. It's really my next slide. I'm not asking you to change my slide yet. My next slide has to do with strategies, but right here, I want to toss out an idea that I'm telling anybody who will listen about. Many people listening will know that in the business world, there's something called a factor. A factor is essentially a lender that will lend a business money on their receivables. So essentially, Joe's HVAC sells their receivable. We've signed off on it. We've said, yes, they've completed the work and the work is satisfactory. That's necessary, that the receivable is confirmed. Then Joe's HVAC sells it to a factoring agent. The factoring agent fronts the money and then eventually gets paid by us when we get paid. Now, the catch is there's a huge charge for that. There's an unbelievably nasty fee for that. 7% is low. 8, 9, 10% is typical. So the factoring agent is getting 10% to loan this money on a guaranteed receivable for 45 days. And I would like to toss out the idea of a nonprofit factoring fund that could carry small subs. I'd like to challenge any bankers in the audience to think about a few $100,000 would be a substantial pool of money to carry small subs. And the money wouldn't go away. It flows out, it comes back in. It flows out, it comes back in. I would suggest a nominal fee, 1 to 2 points, and that would pay for the staff that's managing the process and managing the paperwork. So that's enough on that subject. What do I got next? We all need to face, I'm not done with that slide, but that's okay. I'll just finish it. Yeah, carving up scopes of work may raise costs, and we all need to face that. That falls into the category of inconveniences. So I'm simply raising the subject. We need to be ready for these inconveniences. Okay, now I'm ready. Strategies. I've given this an enormous amount of thought, and it became crystal clear to me that the developer has got to set the standards. There's a very simple reason for that. If I'm building a project in Imperial, I don't know what the project goals are. I could start shooting blindly out trying to achieve DEI goals, but it might not be the goal that the municipality or the developer has in mind for that project. The other ugly little truth on this is that it's going to be a lot of trouble for us to do this. And so are we going to volunteer to do this? I mean, our jobs are hard enough already. We might volunteer to do it. I mean, I will tell you that from 6 months of conversations on DEI, we now have a draft in-house DEI policy. It never occurred to us to have that in the past. We have a pretty diverse employee base in our office, and it just never occurred to us. But out of these conversations, we realized that we had to walk the walk. So I'm rambling a little bit here, but I'm really segueing effectively into the next item, the next bullet. The developer has to set an example of living by DEI standards itself. One of the ways it can do that is by setting ambitious DEI standards at the consultant stage. I'm very surprised how many folks are unaware of the National Organization of Minority Architects. I'm in contact with a number of their offices now. I'd like to challenge developers to start putting DEI consultants on projects. One of my ideas, I didn't know how far I was going to have to look for a qualified, multifamily architect. But you can always use a design architect and then use a known architect as your architect of record. So again, it's another way of carving up work, being a little bit creative to create opportunity. Require all vendors have strong DEI policies and practices. I'm including myself as a vendor. Now, here comes the good news. Affordable housing GCs are used to meeting challenging requirements on these projects. CHW has given us the most challenging Section 3 and local hire that we've ever had to meet. And we've, to take a baseball metaphor, we've hit the ball out of the park every time CHW has given us a challenging Section 3 local hire goal. We manage to succeed. It's not easy. We have people who are paid to do nothing but that, but we're used to it. I mean, we work in the affordable housing industry and difficult processes come with that. So don't hesitate to give us another difficult process. And lastly, require documentation. Don't let people get away with window dressing. You know, I got to share a story with you. I had a veterans requirement on a project. And I got a call from a guy in Santa Monica who said, I'm a vet. I will sub every trade under my license, and you'll have 100% veteran subs because they'll all be under my license. I got to tell you how my blood pressure goes up as I tell you this story. There are people who are going to lie to you. There are people who are going to window dress, and we can't accept it. Require clean and complete documentation of good faith outreach and of success. So let me just glance at my notes here. Hit it all. You know, lastly, I hope that we can inspire subs. I hope that we can inspire subs to enter our industry. I hope that we can inspire subs that there are opportunities in our industry. And I hope we can inspire communities when they see DBE subs working on their projects. That's it for me.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Rosalind. That was great. I see some of our participants are writing in questions. I'd encourage others of you, as you've got questions you'd like to ask, please put them in the Q&A section or the chat section so we can come back to them. We're going to kind of keep moving because I'm sure we'll generate more and more questions as we go along. I know I have a few questions as well. But what I'd like to do is to introduce our next panelist, and then I've got a few questions for them to kind of keep our conversation going. So our first, we've got two more panelists. The first is Drexel C Johnson. He's the founder of the Young Black Contractors Association. Drexel's been involved in construction on a number of different levels since 1980. And then based on his personal experience and desire to level the construction field for Blacks, he started YBCA, the Young Black Contractors Association, as a grassroots group of Black minority contractors that form collectively to address local business opportunities in the construction industry. And then his membership includes general contractors and specialty contractors as well. Avi Shea is the principal with Portrait Construction. It's a general contractor who has been in business since 1990 and has established a reputation for building quality single and multifamily residences throughout California. Portrait has built over 10,000 units of affordable apartments and rehabilitated over 6,000. Start with you, Avi. As it relates to diversity and Black contractors, have you seen a change in the construction industry over the last 10 to 15 years? And if so, can you kind of explain?
Sure. So we've, Section 3 and, minority hiring and all that type of stuff has always been around, right? As long as I can remember in affordable housing, there's always been some requirement. But I think it was probably about 10 years ago, we had a project up in San Francisco, and talking to the city over there at the time, the representative from the city who was managing the diversity program, she basically came out and said, you're going to meet all your diversity requirements, all your minority requirements, but what are you doing about hiring Black contractors or Black people? And, it was like, whoa, what's going on here, And then you come to find out that, it's very true. We had a very small number of, Black representation. So we made an active effort at that time, and we developed programs. Once again, we were working in the community. We, set up job fairs, started bringing on people. We also had, even at that time, we had Black employees. So, as far as we were concerned, we had no issue with it, but just reaching out and making an active effort to hire Black contractors or Black employees, having subs go out and, try to help them with the outreach program, get them involved in the outreach. That was where we started our program. So yeah, this term DEI, that's new for us, but we've been practicing it for quite some time.
Okay, thanks, Avi. Drexel, understand why the Young Black Contractors Association exists. Can you share some examples of how you've been able to impact Black representation on the construction site?
Well, I guess I could do that. I guess I should say positively impact, because we're always all too often negatively driven and drugged down as it relates to getting out there beating the pavement for the work. The problem that we have here in the industry is, and I've listened very, very carefully, is that we're still talking about good faith effort and goals. If a goal is not legally binding, and if it's not mandated, it means absolutely positively nothing to nobody. So when you come out and start talking about Black folks, then you want to talk about brown folks, that shouldn't even be in the same sentence, simply because brown folks are working. Black folks are the ones that's not working. When you talk about people of color, let's say it for what it is. Colored people, wouldn't nobody stand with colored people? Now we're going to switch the narrative and say people of color. Everybody that we're listed with right now as a minority was already in the classroom when we were called colored people. So we don't want to hear nothing from the Young Black Contractors about people of color. We have to call the narrative what it really is. If people really want to understand how to work with Black folks, we have all the bells and whistles. We have a multi-million-dollar grading contractor that can do multi-million-dollar work. We have an underground contractor that can do likewise. We have a plumbing contractor. All these guys are Black. We have a framing contractor. We have a concrete contractor. We have all these people that can do this work. We have an excavating contractor. We have the trucking contractor. We have all these things in place, and people are walking around like they don't even know we exist, because all they do is talk and fight not to do business with us. So if we don't go out and beat the pavement and let the politicians and the preachers and everybody else with their hand out know what we're trying to do and what we're capable of getting done, we'll have nothing. So Van, it's been a real struggle for me and my family, but we've done some great things with respect to fighting and standing up for Black folk and can do this HUD work. No, all the things that you guys were talking about from the smaller mom and pop businesses that don't know this and don't know that, can't, don't, and ain't never did a damn thing. We have all these issues conquered. We can handle all of that. I challenge anyone in the audience or anyone listening or looking at me. I challenge anyone to call us in and give us a set of plans. We can now serve as a GC. We're so well diverse and so well endowed into the work. We know this business, but everywhere we go, we got to prove ourselves again. Everywhere we turn around, we got to prove ourselves again. And it's an honor and a privilege to be on this panel. The last thing I want to say is Black people out front, professional services, stop acting as if you have the authority to make sure people in the community work, and you don't. Your job is to get your job done and to do what you do for you. So upon people in the community working, there's Daoud Sherrills over at Build Plus and Watts. There's a Young Black Contractors. We've made a team of it. We've sitting down doing things the right way. And right now, the local hire, the hard to hire, the very hard to hire, we can do this. We can put the right contractors on the job, and we can successfully be productive and make the contractor a gain and a profit. And I ain't mad no more.
All right. I appreciate you, Drexel. Let me ask you, Avi, because I know you and Drexel have worked together. Can you share with folks kind of how that relationship has worked and how your success at Jordan Downs has worked on the project that you're currently on in terms of hiring Black subcontractors?
At this time at Jordan Downs, we have two significant subcontractors. One's the framing contractor and one is an electrician. They both have they're doing everything. It's not carved out. They have the whole scope. So yes, we've worked with Drexel and his group. We've worked with some other people out there, other organizations. So it hasn't been a problem. Let me just put it that way. The two folks that we have right now, the two subcontractors, they're very well experienced. Very little hand-holding for them. So been very successful at that. I think there's still a need though to continue this process. And I think what Drexel is saying is so true. I mean, they're out there, but that's just a small portion of it. There's a need for more, to bring more on.
Yeah, and I know.
Van,
go ahead.
Van, I just wanted to say, when you look over the whole city, now people say you too loud and you shout too much, and Drexel, you shouldn't do it that way. But I get caught up in that sometimes because very few people care about how we do business. But when you got people out there like Margaret Toddy over there at LA Compliance, they teach, they train, they nurture Black businesses to do better. And when you put your name on it the way she does, she has really been a driving force to help all of our business within the organization. Where we are right now, we shouldn't have to be looked upon as being people that can't perform. We should be the people that's called first, but we're never called first. Everybody that we're listed with right now, they get advantages over us, even though we're supposed to be the #1 minority. And a lot of that's political. But I'll say to you again, Van, all we want to do is work. And it's really sad, even at this date and time, that we're still sitting here talking about good faith effort and certifications. We have all the certifications in the world. We have everything that they want, and we ain't hard to find. Y'all give us a call.
No, I hear you, Drexel, and Margaret's on here, so I know she appreciates the shout out as well. Let me ask you, Peter, just as one over the last couple of years, my conversations with Drexel have always been about just an opportunity to be at the table to bid. And do you find that you're having to go out to find Black subcontractors out in San Diego, or are they finding you when it's time to bid on a project? how is that working in the San Diego area for you?
Van, we haven't had, until recently, we haven't had conversations about a Black focus. I can tell you that conversations about focusing on Black subs has heated up enormously in the past 6 months. We have joined the the National Black Contractors Association in San Diego. We are a supporting member. So I have not myself done Black focused outreach. I've done pure maybe vet outreach. So I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay. No, that's fair. I mean, I know in terms of, I know in talking to Drexel again, part of the challenge when we talk minority contractors, that we know that women, white women kind of fall into that category too. And so
White women get all of the jobs.
So,
White women get all of the jobs.
I'm with you. So when folks say that they've met their minority commitment, when we kind of break it down even further, it's kind of, are we actually representing the communities in which we're serving? And so I like what Rosalind is doing at CHW with having a carve out that's specific in terms of BIPOC, in terms of a target to reach. And that would fit right in with you, Drexel. It's something that we need to look at and consider, in the projects that I'm working on more specifically, so that as you stated, having something, we have a contract in place with the Housing Authority for Jordan Downs that speaks to local hire on the individual level for labor, for workers, as well as businesses, but there's nothing more specific in terms of Black contractors. So it's something more that we need to do. And let me ask you, Avi, your thoughts there in terms of kind of, a more focused outreach, because I know you've done some internal work in terms of your portrait staff in terms of diversity, and then also working on that out in the field.
Absolutely. And it's California has become, lots of minorities. Okay. So, when you start looking for minorities, it's really not that difficult, So I think what we really need to focus on is the disadvantaged minorities, right? That's what we're really talking about. I'm expanding this a little bit away from what Drexel and, you guys are trying to say here, but to be a little bit more inclusive, we really need to look at those communities that are disadvantaged. So having said that, yes, I think, we really need to change. And it's not going to happen because if it's going to come from HUD or whoever, because their policies are so general and they're meant for the United States of America, not for California. It's, so things need to happen at the local level too.
Very true. Good point. Thank you, Avi.
Yeah.
Let me, actually, if I may, I want to share with you just a quick couple of slides on just showing some of the success that we've had at Jordan Downs. And I'll run through it quickly, and then we'll kind of see about these questions that are coming through the chat. This first slide, I just simply wanted to, and then Marco Ramirez is on here. So Marco, I'm going to act like I'm getting all the credit for the Section 3 work, but Marco Ramirez on my team is really the mover and driver of this Section 3 work that we're involved in at Jordan Downs. But this here just shows the collaboration, all the different partners that have been involved in our work at Jordan Downs in terms of the Section 3 work and hiring folks at the local level to work, and then also on the business side. I know one of the questions that came out before was that Bridge can do this because Bridge is big. But it's in this case, it's our local team at Bridge that's really making that's driving this effort and the success of it, along with all of these partners. Next slide, please. Now, this shows that the top two zip codes are for Watts. So we had a very focused effort to get people at Jordan Downs and in Watts working. But then, you know, there are people all over the place who want to work, and it doesn't matter where the work is, they want to work. So, you know, we've got quite a number of zip codes represented here. Next slide. We had a goal, as Drexel had mentioned earlier, we need to have stuff in a contract. Our contract with the Housing Authority was 30% of our Section 3. We needed to get a Section 3 goal of 30% of local hire. In our first two phases at Jordan Downs, we have a combined local hire percentage of 77%. Our first phase, off on the far right there, we hit 70%. Our second phase, which is under construction right now, we're hitting 100% local hire. So, you know, combined 77%. And, you know, and our second phase is not complete yet, but we're still moving at a very good pace. Next slide. This just shows you kind of the 146, the numbers at the very bottom of the 146 new jobs that were created through these first two phases. 113 of them went to Section 3 workers. So there are some cases when folks came outside of that system, but we hit, we hit above our goal of 30% and hit a 77% combined total. Next slide. You can go to the next one. This one, I just wanted to highlight the slide at the bottom left. We talked about, you know, we talked about a focus with Black folks. So of our local hires that were hired, 63 of them were Black, 50 of them were Latino. And then and then if you look at the top on the top left, we had 15 women that were hired. So women are working in the construction field. Next slide. And this just shows you, if you look at, focus on this, on the right portion, the left portion, I'm sorry. We've got a lot of folks in the labor section, but the drywall installers, carpentry and security guards, electricians, landscape, you know, were kind of our top areas. But you see that we had some of our smaller subs were able to still pull on one local hire as a commitment to the project, but as a commitment to the community that they were building in. Something that, you know, as you've heard today, that we really need to, as nonprofit developers, kind of have that commitment of our general contractors and then pass that on to the commitment of our subcontractors as well. Next slide. Well, they had significant numbers of hours. You can go to the next slide. I think this tells another, I'm sorry, go back one slide. One more. One more. One more, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. So the bottom left here, something to point out is that the average pay rate for the local hires, the Section 3 workers, was $33.40 an hour. The local hire, the Section 3 workers had a combined total earnings of almost $1.2 million. So if you can imagine all of the developers on this call and all the projects that we're involved in, you start to multiply that 1.2 million. Those are just the people who were hired by the subcontractors who had new positions that they needed to fill. And so you take that number and then go to the very last slide, please. And combine that with this slide. Our second phase is still under construction, but our first and second phase to this point were $52.82 million. And of that dollar amount, 11.87 million went to Section 3 businesses, minority businesses. And of that 11.87, 40, I have that number on a separate sheet, 46% of that, almost $12 million, went to Black contractors. And so, that's no small amount. And again, this is just one project, well, two projects within one development. But if we start looking at all the nonprofits involved in SCAMP, all the projects that we're involved in, all the development, I mean, we start getting into the billions of dollars in terms of the amount of construction work that we're all involved in collectively. And if we start looking at a portion of that going to residents of those communities in which we're serving, and then a portion of that going to minority and then also to Black subcontractors, we start to kind of have an impact far greater than just the affordable housing that we're building. And I think that's kind of the thought process we need to have. And as you listened to Rosalind earlier from CHW, it's kind of what they're doing. If you look at the work, a portrait of Peter, of Sun, I keep saying Sunrun, Sun Country, we began to have a greater impact on the work that we're providing well beyond affordable housing. And with that, I will stop. And Denise, do you want to kind of look at and put some of the questions out there for folks to answer?
Yes, so thank you, everyone. So one of the first questions that we received early was asking, so what should a developer be asked to provide to assess their commitment to DEI? And are there any system software that should be used?
I'll start off, and Rosalind, you can weigh in. I mean, I don't know about any software. I just know that kind of it's the expectation that we have of our general contractor in terms of, diversifying the workforce to represent the communities that we're serving. And kind of staying on them and working with them through our partnerships with the different organizations at Jordan, and then working through organizations like Drexel's to kind of help channel folks, contractors to the job to bid on the jobs. Rosalind?
No, Van, I agree. I think that's, there's really no software. We try to look at our data. Our data wasn't really conclusive. So you just have to kind of go in there and start. We've had a good representation with our senior leadership. That was an important goal from senior leadership all the way down. So it's a company-wide thing that we're doing this. So, and we're doing it. So that's kind of where it started for us. And you have to start, and you have to start it, and you have to keep going and keep improving as you go.
Hey, Van, I'd like to just toss out real quickly. I think it was Rosalind's slide that talked about numbers of subs. And I'd just like to challenge us all to start thinking about percentages of dollars. If we've got, if we got 20 subs on the job, it may be pretty easy to give 3 small trades to MBEs. But I'd like to challenge us all to start thinking about percentages of dollars on the project.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Peter, because HUD is moving into not looking at 30% of new hires or 10% of the contracts. They're starting to look at them all in terms of dollars. Yeah. So 30% of the workforce, 10% of the contract total, wanting that to kind of be the target. So it's for my work at Jordan, it's moving in that it's already, my next phase is already there. But I think you're right. It's people can get off the hook by just, giving it to the security company or some folks to clean up when the project's done. But if it's got to be 10%, then yeah, you start, as Avi mentioned, you look at a framer, you look at a drywaller, you look at, you know, the electricians kind of really filling and meeting those, helping you hit that target.
So Rosalind, so where can someone find the language for DEI implementation like what you presented today?
Great question. Where can they find the language? I think, you know, we looked at what has been some of the kind of leading studies, you know, some of them recent, some of them not, regarding, you know, what is BIPOC. That's something that particular term has probably surfaced probably in the last, let's say, 18 months or so. So, you know, and we thought that particular description of Black, Indigenous people of color is pretty a good kind of description. So I think, you know, we looked at what people who are experts in this DEI work, what are their languages are. We looked at that as well. I think that's important to kind of say the language that we need to say and use, because that it particularly tells us who and what we're going to, our goals, and it kind of helps, I guess, help define our goals.
Great, thank you. Another question ties to outreach. So how well is the DEI efforts tied to outreach of community colleges and funding for STEM education in low income neighborhoods?
I'll tackle that one. I'm not, there are, like Drexel mentioned, Margaret Toddy, who is on this call. The work source centers through the city of LA have training programs and training dollars. And there are a couple of other organizations that already provide training, and it's really us functioning as a conduit, letting the community know that a development is coming, and kind of the having a partner that does outreach to direct people interested in construction jobs and a career in construction to those training programs. So for that first slide you had up for us, you know, we had the city agency, the Watts Work Source Center, career expansion, we had Youth Build, and, you know, just a ton of other folks who are already doing this kind of work, just kind of coordinating them to have more of a targeted outreach effort around Jordan and in Watts. So there are lots of agencies around that are doing this. We just, as developers, we just haven't made the connection with them, but the work source centers have been around. And,
the
you know,
work source, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Drexel.
The work source centers has been around for eons of years. And the problem with the work source centers, and I don't have a problem with them personally, but the community has been shorted by way of people not being willing to go and deal with the grassroots issues and the grassroots people in the community. And I say that by saying, again, Margaret Toddy and Daoud Sherrills, we formulated a conduit to reach out to so many different communities to talk about how we can help you. Because when you hire an outreach person, first of all, you want to know, do they know the right area to reach out to? How long are their arms? Who can they reach out to? Are they interested in reaching out? Nobody's interested in finding anybody on a low level of Blackness to do construction work. That's just a fact. Now, when we find these people and get them in a classroom like Daoud and I do and Margaret does, when we get them in the classroom and start teaching them and showing them this is the steps you need to take, we really kind of get it going. But it's real sensitive on that outreach tab to do and hire the right person for outreach, because the average person that's college educated, let me just call it for what it is. The average person that's college educated and been around the block for a couple of years, they don't really want to reach out to the grassroots community. They don't want to reach out to the hard to hire. They don't want to reach out to the gangs. They don't want to reach out to veterans even. But when you're in this community, people should not build in front of you without giving you a chance to sit at the table. And that's all that we ask for.
Great, thank you. So another question is, so when it comes to setting these contracting goals, how do the contractors and the vendors react to those goals? So I guess that would go for Rosalind and Van.
I'll start, Van. Well, how do they react? I'm like, Peter, no. I won't put Peter on the spot.
Peter, Avi,
I won't put Peter on the spot. No, we're as I said, this is kind of we're just getting into having more specific goals. Peter and his team, they were at the table. And when we talk about these are our goals, they had to tell us, where, is this doable? Is this feasible? So, I think a lot of the contractors in like Sun Country, they're ready to do that. They're ready to, one of the things, and Peter talked about, accept the challenge that this is what we do. We've done this before. We accepted, we accepted these challenges and exceeded. So I think it's about your partnership, your long-term partnership with your team. This wasn't something, we didn't fly by night. We talked to them and we said, okay, we're going to do it. And so I think that's the key. It's the partnership.
I also think, it goes back to where, we're working towards federal goals. It's set by somebody in Washington. It was probably done, I don't know, 50 years ago or something like that. All this Section 3 stuff. I don't know the history on it, but we're still living with it. I mean, it doesn't really quite address local issues. They don't. So the goals are, once you get into Section 3 and all that, Section 3 is relatively easy to meet. And it's a goal, once again, nobody's telling us we have to. But, when you really get down to it, Section 3 is, how many of the new hires we have to hire, an X amount. Well, there are not that many new hires, first of all. So I don't know, maybe there should be some kind of mandate that, hey, hire 5%, 10%, directly from the community. Now, if you can't meet those goals, because sometimes it is not possible, and there should be some, the good faith effort and all that, genuine good faith. So that's my take on it.
Great, thank you. So, well, there is a direct question to Avi and Peter. Can you discuss how you monitor required minority workforce participation compliance?
Boy, I always started with the Caltrans database. The Caltrans database was the starting point for me. And I always took it as gospel that if a minority sub was registered with Caltrans, that I could rely on that. So I appreciated that Drexel brought up the idea of don't come into my town and take the work and don't share it. We've always tried to do local hire just because we think it's rude to bring in our subs from 50 miles away and do the job and then leave. It's just been a policy of Sun Country Builders, just out of courtesy. I use the Caltrans Excel spreadsheet. It's a massive list, which is largely out of date, which of course increases the work. But so you use what you've got. But the wonderful advantage of that Excel sheet is that you can order it by zip codes. So you can identify the location of your job and then search, let's say, 5 surrounding zip codes. And so that's how I've always done minority outreach, is 5 zip codes around my project, Caltrans database.
We use some other ones out there. We also use, the city provided ones, depending on where we're at. So it varies. But
Yeah, I'm sorry, Avi, I thought you'd stop.
No,
I search out organizations. I mean, the last time we had a job in Riverside, I found a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So those are obvious low-hanging fruit that you reach out to. But it takes a little bit of rummaging to find those folks. Now, Drexel tells me that it's going to be real easy now that I know Drexel. I'm going to have access to all those trades. So
That's right.
I'm ready. Drexel, I'm ready to go.
Yes, Drexel, and folks are asking for your contact information, so make sure you provide it.
Oh, absolutely. Back to what he was saying first. When you call me and tell me you're ready to sit down to talk about any one specific project, I will have you at least 15 to 20 trades go to work. And we will sit there and put some good numbers together. All we need is plans and specifications. We will turn in numbers. And we don't waste our time. We don't go after stuff we don't think we're going to get. But if you're willing to sit with us, we will be fair and put in decent numbers.
Drexel, I promise you that you will see every one of our jobs moving forward. I promise that right now, right here.
That's good. I appreciate that. I thank you for that. So let me just leave all of you guys my information. My phone number is area code 323-385-0639. My email address is ybca.info@yahoo.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Drexel.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Ben, sorry, could you type that in the chat for everyone as I pull up these other questions?
Yes, I will.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
All right.
So another question that came up regarding good tracking and reporting. So I know you guys talked about workforce participation and compliance, but what is a reporting process or tracking option for the DEI project, or for the DEI hiring throughout the project against the goal? And what's something that's simple and easy for folks to be able to use where it doesn't take up so much time for the GC to jump on board?
We use LCP tracker right now for pretty much all the prevailing wage and Section 3 stuff. And it's cumbersome even for the subcontractors sometimes to just managing the whole process. To add another layer, to it, I don't think would be too difficult. But that's something that it needs to come from the policymakers, basically.
Thank you, Avi. So Rosalind, so how has CHW prepared for the possibility of costs increasing as a result of more aggressive goals?
Great question. I think, we're willing to sit down with our GC as, our goal is, our intention is to make sure they know what our goals are for our projects as early as possible. So as they're going out to bid, they know, what our expectations are. And then when we're, having those talks and negotiations, and we talk together, what if someone who a BIPOC or MBE is not the lowest bidder? Let's have that discussion. Let's sit down and talk through what that looks like. And so I think that's the way we're going to handle it and see what comes from that. But it's about, again, I think I always go back to that word partnership. It's about, working together. We understand our objectives. We're going to work together and achieve our goals.
Thank you, Rosalind. So that's all that I have for questions right now, unless anyone else has, or anyone else amongst the panel have a question for someone else on the panel.
Yeah, I'd put out there for all the developers on here as well. I mean, we're talking a lot about what, kind of diversifying the workforce in terms of the construction site, but that we should all, and I think Peter mentioned it earlier too, give more thought to making sure our, some of the subcontractors that the developer that we hire directly, that we make sure we are diversifying that pool of folks as well. As it relates to any and all of the contractors that we engaged in pre-development, through construction, and on the back end to get these projects done. And I will say, Peter, one thing that resonated with me that you said was that fund for small contractors. And I think, and I would say that to Denise, that's something we should, Tanua wasn't able to join us today, but that's something I think we should run by LISC, and kind of see how that, if there's a role for them to play in that. Because I know, as it's, in some projects, there you run into issues depending on the number of funders that you've got involved, but to kind of go 60, 90 days out can be tough for some subcontractors. But if there's a way to develop some kind of a fund for small contractors, there may be a way for, a way to kind of help in the interim in some of those projects. I think it's a concept worth investigating in a bit more detail.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, it's LISC money. Tanua's not here right now. So everyone want to take we could vote on it right now. Everyone listening in.
Volunteer LISC, and they're like, wait.
Yeah, and then just to say too that LISC is also promoting the Ascend ASCEND-LA program, and the focus is on contractors and making sure that those who are looking to enter into the field have the resources necessary. Because I know one thing that came up was training, making sure they have access to funds, and being able to just get into it may be cumbersome or expensive. So what are the resources out there that's needed? LISC has the Ascend LA program as well, and I believe that's been posted, and the applications are due, I believe, August 30 or August 31st. Thank you, Deborah. It was just posted.
Well,
Hey, I want to thank Drexel for the passion. Drexel, I hear you. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. And I just want to say in my closing today, there's always a little passion that's going to come with a guy of my status with all that I've gone through to get this far. However, if there's some sort of creative measures to assist the subcontractor in getting his first payment, and then getting prompt payment, and then not separating the change order from the hard contract too far along down the line, that contractor, in my opinion, would be very, very successful.
Yeah. Now we're talking nuts and bolts.
Yes, we are. We are.
And nuts and bolts is where it is where it lives.
That's where it's at.
Well, if I may, Denise, just to thank Avi, Peter, Rosalind, Drexel. Thank you guys very much. Thanks for being candid. Thanks for sharing your experience.
Yes, sir.
And and we'll keep. And then Denise, thanks for driving the conversation and keeping SCAMP, pushing us forward. And we do hope to have another conversation to get in even more detail to hopefully provide more nonprofit developers with direct access to organizations and people who can kind of help them really carry out their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on the construction site, and hopefully within their organizations as well. And so, Denise, thank you very much for making this happen.
Well, thank you, Van. Thank you for being my partner along the way, because like I said, in the very first session, the conversation came up amongst other developer directors about Drexel as somebody we did not know. And I came to you. I came to to Van, and he was so helpful and resourceful. And he says, yeah, no, Drexel, I've been working with him. And that's what started this conversation. So Drexel, thank you too for being in this space where we're able to have this conversation and
welcome.
talk some hard truths. I know even in some cases where we talk about minority, it's hard for some folks to even break down what that means and to see how much farther we have to go in order to pull groups up. And if we're saying that we're looking to help diminish that wealth gap and to be able to promote communities where they're able to build, we have to be able to get down to the root. And I appreciate you for being here and helping us hold ourselves accountable to that.
Thank you so much. I just think it's just keeping the narrative in the right position to move forward, and everything will take care of itself.
Yeah. So thank you all again for joining us this afternoon in our session. And I look forward to having another session in the DEI in affordable housing construction. So everyone have a great afternoon, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
Thanks, Denise.